So picture this, somewhere in the vast, dramatic, overly cinematic blue of the ocean, US forces roll up like the world's most serious Uber ride and politely say, "Excuse us, sir, we're gonna need to see what's in the trunk." And boom, surprise inspection. A ship cruising along, allegedly stuffed with Chinese-made dual-use components heading to Iran, suddenly finds itself in a pop quiz it did not study for. Several hundred miles off Sri Lanka, American operatives board the vessel, confiscate the cargo, and then casually let the ship continue like, "All right buddy, you're free to go, but think about what you did." Now, if you're wondering whether Washington is testing the waters, splashing around, or doing cannonballs into geopolitical tension, yes. All of the above. The Wall Street Journal says this interception happened quietly, in November, which is the government's favorite month to do things quietly, right before everyone starts arguing about Thanksgiving politics. And this is apparently the first time in several years the US has stopped a China to Iran shipment like this, which is diplomatic code for "we remembered how to do this again." Meanwhile, the Indo-Pacific Command is like, "We neither confirm nor deny," which is government speak for "please stop asking questions while we shuffle papers aggressively." But let's be honest, this isn't about papers. This is about chess. Big chess. The kind of chess where the pieces are ships, sanctions, missiles, and very strongly worded press releases. The US says these components could be used for civilian purposes or military ones, which is the international version of saying, this could be a calculator or a rocket launcher. And Washington is accusing China of helping Iran rebuild and modernize its ballistic missile forces. China, of course, says, "Absolutely not, how dare you," while doing that thing where they look offended but also extremely prepared. And while all this serious global strategy is happening, you know who's not surprised? Regular American citizens. Because US citizens have been paying attention. These are people who juggle rent, gas prices, student loans, and still somehow know where Sri Lanka is on a map. That's impressive. These are folks who can argue about football stats, budget spreadsheets, and foreign policy all before lunch. Salute to you, America. Now, sanctions enter the chat. In April, the US slapped sanctions on 6 entities and 6 individuals in Iran and China for helping Iran's Revolutionary Guard get ingredients for rocket motors. Solid propellant, to be specific, which sounds boring until you realize it's what makes missiles go zoom instead of just sitting there awkwardly like expensive paperweights. China says these sanctions are illegal, unfair, and totally rude, which is exactly what everyone says when they get sanctioned. And here's the wild part, this is not even the first time. The US has been doing interception reruns like it's Netflix. January 2024, 200 packages of Iranian-made components seized in the Arabian Sea. Allegedly headed to Houthi militants in Yemen. 2023, nearly 1 million barrels of Iranian oil intercepted on the way to China. 2020, 4 oil tankers seized en route to Venezuela in what Washington proudly called the biggest seizure ever, like it won a trophy at the Sanctions Olympics. And through all of this, the average American citizen is still waking up, going to work, paying taxes, and somehow keeping the entire system running while politicians argue on cable news like it's a reality show reunion episode. Seriously, if there were medals for patience, US citizens would have a drawer full of them. Now let's talk about leadership styles for a second, because this is where things get spicy. Remember Donald Trump? Of course you do. You could be living under a rock, and Trump would still find a way to announce himself. This is the guy who treated diplomacy like a wrestling promo. Every policy announcement felt like it was about to be followed by fireworks and a bald eagle screaming freedom. Trump would probably hear about this ship seizure and immediately say something like, "Nobody intercepts ships better than us. Nobody. China tried, Iran tried, but we did it. Beautiful interception. Perfect interception." He'd hold a press conference in front of a flag the size of a Walmart and congratulate himself like he personally swam out there and boarded the ship in a red tie. Meanwhile, real Americans would be like, "Cool, but can you also fix the roads?" And this is why US citizens deserve praise. Because they see through the noise. They know the difference between actual governance and performance art. They understand that strength isn't yelling the loudest, it's competence, consistency, and occasionally shutting up and doing the job. Oh, and real quick, if you're enjoying this geopolitical comedy grenade right now, do your civic duty and gently, lovingly, heroically smash that subscribe button. I'm not saying democracy depends on it, but I'm also not saying that. Subscribe to News Grenade, because unlike some politicians, we actually follow through on what we promise. Plus, subscribing burns calories. Probably. Back to the chaos. The US government tracks shipments, watches ports, monitors seas, and plays the longest game of ICU ever invented. This isn't flashy. This is spreadsheets, satellites, analysts with caffeine addictions, and people who haven't seen daylight since 2012. And it works because Americans believe in systems, not saviors. Contrast that with Trump, who believed every problem could be solved by a nickname. Iran? Nickname. China? Nickname. NATO? Probably a nickname too if he had time. Meanwhile, US citizens are the ones quietly keeping alliances intact, voting, volunteering, serving, and paying attention even when it's exhausting. And let's not ignore NASA's reported airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities earlier this year, because nothing says America like scientists and fighter jets somehow being part of the same sentence. Only the US could turn space nerds into action heroes. China keeps saying these sanctions interfere with normal cooperation, which is an interesting phrase when the cooperation allegedly involves missile parts. That's like saying, "Officer, I was just normally cooperating with the bank vault." But again, through all this global tension, the unsung heroes are the people. Teachers. Engineers. Truck drivers. Nurses. Veterans. Immigrants. The citizens who don't tweet threats at 3 a.m. but still somehow hold the line. These are the people who actually make America intimidating, not loud politicians, but quiet competence. Trump loved to say only he could fix things. Americans proved that wrong every single day by fixing things without needing applause. And as these ships get intercepted and sanctions get slapped, remember this, the strength of the US isn't in one man, one speech, or one ego. It's in millions of citizens who don't need to brag because they're too busy doing. Now before we wrap this up, let me just say, if Donald Trump were narrating this story, he'd say the ocean personally respects him. The waves would salute. The ship would surrender voluntarily. And the components would confess. But in reality, the job gets done by professionals. By systems. By Americans who believe that power doesn't need to scream, it just needs to work. And if you believe in that kind of strength, that kind of humor, and that kind of unapologetic truth-telling, then do me one last favor. Subscribe to News Grenade. Hit the like button like it owes you money. Share this video like classified documents accidentally stored in a golf club bathroom. Subscribe because algorithms are powerful, but informed citizens are stronger. This is News Grenade, where the satire is sharp, the citizens are respected, and the egos, well, they get absolutely roasted.